Since there are so many methods for strategically destroying Earth and the humanity on it, while some people profit during this lifetime and care less about the future lifetimes, it's tough to really focus on one because there are so many. But chemtrails are one that I absolutely despise. And I think it's shameful for people, more and more people, not to recognize these things as they're sprayed everywhere. They're so obvious, they're so clearly different from commercial traffic. It couldn't be more ridiculous. And none of the news people are covering it because they obviously steer everyone's attention away. However, when you look at their websites, like Harvard's, who has a site with a huge collection of research papers and things from all over the world, which I'll link below, you can really find out a lot of information that nobody's telling you anywhere else. And the implications of all this are ridiculous. And so I found about 13 out of thousands, and I found so many, but I picked 13 that I'm going to talk about here, and we'll see how they all add up. So I'm going to start with this one. Sensitivity of global mortality to sulfate geoengineering, from your friends at Harvard. Geoengineering with stratospheric aerosol injection may be an effective measure to manage climate risks associated with anthropogenic greenhouse gases, which they created. However, although many studies of SAI, strategic stratospheric aerosol injection, have examined the consequences for the climate and ozone layer, to date none have quantified the associated impacts on human health, because they don't care. We combine prior estimates of the climate responses to SAI, a microphysical aerosol model, and a global chemistry transport model to estimate changes in global mortality resulting from SAI due to its effects on air quality and surface UV exposure. We find that SAI sufficient to produce 1 K of global cooling in 2040 would result in between negative 30,000 and plus 79,000 premature air quality and UV-related mortalities, deaths per year. This is equivalent to approximately 1% of global premature mortality attributable to surface air quality degradation in 2014. Reduced temperatures result in increased formation of inorganic aerosol and therefore an average of 26,000 additional premature mortalities per year. Reductions in precipitation also increase aerosol burdens, resulting in a further 13,000 premature deaths per year. Injected aerosol descending to the surface increases annual mortality by 7,400, so they say, while the net impact of photochemical changes reduces annual mortality by 20,000. Uncertainty in the response functions relating exposure to mortality are responsible for 95% of the variance in the result, with only 5% attributable to climate sensitivity. However, this total does not include other benefits and effects of SAI, such as reducing near-term mortality associated with increased mean and extreme temperatures, global warming farce, which may be an order of magnitude larger than the impact. So that's where they try to sneak it in, that they're doing this for the good, but they don't care about the chemical interactions with the human. It's not part of their studies, it's not part of their models, they don't care. Is turning down the sun a good proxy for stratospheric sulfate geoengineering? Deliberately blocking out a small portion of the incoming solar radiation would cool the climate. One such approach would be injecting SO2 into the stratosphere, which would produce sulfate aerosols that would remain in the atmosphere for 1 to 3 years, we think, reflecting part of the incoming shortwave radiation. The cooling produced by the aerosols can offset the warming produced by increased greenhouse gases concentrations, but it would also affect the climate differently, leading to residual differences compared to a climate not affected by either. Many climate model simulations of geoengineering have used a uniform reduction of the incoming solar radiation as a proxy for stratospheric aerosols, both because many models are not designed to adequately capture relevant stratospheric aerosol processes, and because a solar reduction has often been assumed to capture the most important differences between how stratospheric aerosols and greenhouse gases would affect the climate. Here we show that dimming the sun does not produce the same surface climate effects as simulating aerosols in the stratosphere. By more closely matching the spatial pattern of solar reduction to that of the aerosols, some improvements in this idealized representation are possible, with further improvements if the stratospheric heating produced by the aerosols is included. This is relevant both for our understanding of the physical mechanisms driving the changes observed in stratospheric sulfate geoengineering simulations and in terms of the relevance of impact assessments that use a uniform solar dimming. Again, all these people think about are their models. These are all they're basing decisions that affect every single human on Earth, especially the Northern Hemisphere, on computer models that they create and their companies create. Not right. Must end. Updated and outdated reservations about research into stratospheric aerosol injection. In this paper, we seek to ground discussions of the governance of stratospheric aerosol injection research in recent literature about the field, including an updated understanding of the technology's deployment logistics and scale, patterns of effects, and research pathways. Relying upon this literature, we evaluate several common reservations regarding the governance of pre-deployment research and testing, including covert deployment, technological lock-in, weaponization, slippery slope, and the blurry line between research and deployment. We conclude that these reservations are no longer supported by literature. However, we do not argue that there is no reason for concern. Instead, we enumerate alternative bases for caution about research into stratospheric aerosol injection, which are supported by an up-to-date understanding of the literature. We conclude that in order to establish the correct degree and type of governance for stratospheric aerosol injection research, the research community must focus its attention on these well-grounded reservations. However, while these reservations are supported and warrant further attention, we conclude that none currently justifies restrictive governance of early-stage stratospheric aerosol injection research. So although we're finding things that are negative and things that are terrible and potentially bad for all of humanity, we don't think that there should be any restrictions and testing should be allowed to occur, even to the point where if they test us and something goes terribly wrong, oops, it's all in the name of science. How sweet. Effects of stratospheric sulfate injection on tropopause height. And a lot of these affiliations are from all over the world, every country you can imagine. And so here we go. The spatial and temporal structure of the tropopause plays a significant role in the exchange between the troposphere and the stratosphere. Studies of tropopause height during the last decades have shown an upward trend, both in reanalysis and climate models, which would continue in global warming scenarios. This trend has been related to the cooling of the tropical lower stratosphere and plays a role in the broadening of the tropics. We have computed the geopotential height for the tropopause using GLENS, Stratospheric Aerosol Geoengineering Large Ensemble Project. But nope, this stuff isn't real. Control and geoengineering simulations to see if sulfate injection would compensate for the positive trend. The goal of the geoengineering simulations in GLENS was to maintain not only global mean surface temperature, but also interhemispheric and equator to pole surface temperature gradients at 2020 values under an RCP 8.5 greenhouse gas scenario. Our results show an upward trend in RCP 8.5 runs, but show a downward trend of the same magnitude for the geoengineering simulations in the middle and low latitudes. Thus, trying to maintain global temperature using the GLENS simulated sulfate injection scheme would lead to a very low annual mean tropical tropopause, 1 kilometer lower in 2100 than in 2020. Whereas for the rest of the globe, the descent would be smaller as latitude increases. This would lead to an equator-wide shift of the subtropical jets and to an increase of the moisture flux into the lower stratosphere. But don't worry, these processes that have been going on for Earth in a long time, need to be changed because people need to cash in on the global warming BS. So don't worry, everybody. You're in good hands here. And to add to the mystery of Greenland, they have a lot of research into there. God knows what they do in that place where nobody knows about. But here we go. Greenland ice sheet response to stratospheric aerosol injection geoengineering. And this is a lot of China here in this one. The Greenland ice sheet is expected to lose at least 90% of its current volume if ice sheet's summer temperatures warm by around 1.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial. Geoengineering by stratospheric sulfate aerosol injection might slow Greenland ice sheet melting and sea level rise by reducing summer temperature and insolation. However, such schemes could also reduce precipitation and affect large-scale climate drivers such as the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. That sounds like we should mess with that. That doesn't sound natural. Earlier work found that AMOC, Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the natural process, increased under geoengineering, and that might lead to greater mass loss from Greenland than under greenhouse gas forcing alone. We simulated Greenland ice sheet climates using 4 Earth system models, running the stratospheric sulfate aerosol injection experiment, geo blah blah blah, and the blah 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 blah, our greenhouse gas scenarios that were then used to drive the surface energy and mass balance model, CMEC. Simulated runoff is 20% lower under G4 than blah 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 is 17% higher. The mechanism is through increased Arctic sea ice concentration and reduced humidity, leading to surface cooling of the ablation zone. Reduced absorption of outgoing long-wave radiation caused by hydrological cycle weakening dominates associated decreases in precipitation under geoengineering and stronger AMOC than under RCP 415. An ice dynamics model simulates 15% lower ice losses under G4 than RCP 4.5, thus total sea level rise by 2070 from the Greenland ice sheet under G4 geoengineering is about 15 to 20% lower than under the RC 4.5 scenario. And again, as stated by computers using models created by them, the people who cash in. Again, Greenland ice sheet surface mass balance under stratospheric sulfate aerosol injection geoengineering. So I recommend checking these out because they are kind of intense. This one is, again, I just wanted to show you more greenhouse ones done by China in Greenland, where they go by their models, they do whatever kind of testing they want. We have no idea what happens in these areas of the earth where they don't show us, they don't tell us, and news doesn't come out about. They could be doing experiments all over the place, and they think that they're isolated to these places, but they're not. They affect everyone, and they don't tell us, and they really have to. Our air quality is becoming like our water quality. It's dying. So you guys can read over this one. I'm not gonna. This one has a lot of different things, but again, they're all very interesting. They're all very telling. They all show a different side of the world that isn't being told about. A side that where scientists know exactly what they're doing. Funding, government funding from all different countries around the world knows exactly what's going on, and the wool is pulled over everyone else's eyes, and they're like, oh, you see a plane dumping tons of clouds above you in X's forming over your cities and towns. People are getting headaches everywhere. Nothing to worry about. We're just testing. We need to, because global warming is such a problem, because our natural systems are so out of whack. Nope. Because of us. Because of all us people. We're the ones that are the fault, not these guys experimenting in this place like it's nothing. And so they stink. And I'm not even going to read that one. So here we go. This one I will read. Terrestrial biogeochemical feedbacks to a geoengineered climate. And again, the affiliations. I recommend looking at these titles, and you can find these on the site that I'll link to below. So climate geoengineering has been proposed as a possible means of mitigating anthropogenic warming. While analysis illustrating the impacts of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering on climate change under various projected emission scenarios are comprehensively discussed, only a few studies have considered the terrestrial biogeochemical feedbacks to a geoengineered climate. These feedbacks could modify the atmospheric carbon dioxide trajectory by storing or releasing additional carbon in terrestrial and marine ecosystems and thus change the climate trajectory, requiring a modified aerosol injection strategy. In this study, we analyzed model output from the Stratospheric Aerosol Geoengineering Large Ensemble Project to evaluate the terrestrial biogeochemical feedbacks to climate. Our results showed that terrestrial ecosystems stored an additional 79 pgc, or 37 parts per million CO2 equivalent, from the atmosphere in a geoengineered climate compared to the climate without geoengineering, which could yield as much as a 7% reduction in atmospheric CO2 by the end of the 21st century under the RCP 8.5 emission trajectory. Hypothesis regarding the causes of the different regional responses will be presented. So these people have got their claws in this, and they know the money that's in it, and they know the damage it will do, and they don't care. An update on engineering issues concerning stratospheric aerosol injection for geoengineering. And keep in mind, all of these have links to papers that you can see the whole thing, the PDF on most of them. Some are hidden, but you can see a lot. So here we go. Lockley, who knows what these people are? They look like Americans. Solar Radiation Management, SRM Geoengineering, is a proposed response to anthropogenic global warming. Stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, is one proposed method reliant on lofting particles into the stratosphere. Engineering reviews related to this technology approach have been sparse, with major primary analysis now at least 5 years old. Yet chemtrails have been going on for very long, at least 20. We attempt to bridge this gap with a short review of recent developments in fields of engineering with potential applicability to stratospheric aerosol injection. So they are just now, what it seems like, starting to research the effects that this has on the public. But I remember chemtrails since before 2000, way before 2000. These things have been going for a long time, and I've been pointing them out to a lot of people. And everyone I know is pretty much oblivious except for a few. But it's mind-blowing. They've been doing these experiments for a very long time. This world out here in the research world is a lot different than the one that they tell us. They hide it, they get off on knowing this stuff that we don't, cashing in on it, and with unknown consequences that our future children are going to have to face. How nice of them. Here we go. Seasonal injection strategies for stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. So some of these are really comprehensive, and they show a lot of their plans, and their plans are never really nice. And look at all these different affiliates. So simulations of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering have typically considered injections at a constant rate over the entire year. How nice. However, the seasonal variability of both sunlight and the stratospheric circulation suggests seasonally dependent injection strategies. We simulated single-point injections of the same amount of SO2 in each of the 4 seasons and at 5 different latitudes, 30 degrees, 15, you can check that, 5 km above the tropopause. Our findings suggest that injecting only during one season reduces the amount of SO2 needed to achieve a certain aerosol optical depth, thus potentially reducing some of the side effects of geoengineering. We find in particular that injections at 15 degrees north or 15 degrees south in spring of the corresponding hemisphere results in the largest reductions in incoming solar radiation. Compared to annual injections, by injecting in the different seasons, we identify additional distinct spatio-temporal aerosol optical depth patterns, thanks to seasonal differences in the stratospheric circulation. So they did a lot of things in the past that didn't work, and they are just now catching up on it and starting to recognize it, because what do they care? And what if they were to find out that this was terrible and that breathing this in caused cancer or caused multiple headaches for people? Would they change? I don't think so. Not if the cash keeps flowing. And here we go. CESM1, Stratospheric Aerosol Geoengineering Large Ensemble Project, the ones we've been hearing about and some of the other ones. I tried to pick clips that all kind of connected. This paper describes the Stratospheric Aerosol Geoengineering Large Ensemble GLENS project, which promotes the use of a unique model dataset performed with the Community Earth System model, with the whole atmosphere community climate model as its atmospheric component, to investigate global and regional impacts of geoengineering. The performed simulations were designed to achieve multiple simultaneous climate goals by strategically placing sulfur injections at 4 different locations in the stratosphere. Unlike many earlier studies that targeted globally average surface temperature by placing injections in regions at or around the equator, this advanced approach reduces some of the previously found adverse effects of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, including uneven cooling between the poles in the equator and shifts in tropical precipitation. The 20-member ensemble increases the ability to distinguish between force changes and changes due to climate variability in global and regional climate variables in the coupled atmosphere, land, sea ice, and ocean system. We invite the broader community to perform in-depth analysis of climate-related impacts and to identify processes that lead to changes in the climate system as the result of a strategic application of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. So these people have done a lot without anyone knowing, without anyone's consent, and without a care. It's really sickening. When will this stop? When they finally realize that it's doing a lot of damage and it's way too late? We must stop it before that. And this is another one that is worth checking out in the PDF form, but I'll read about it here a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Sensitivity of the radiative forcing by stratospheric sulfur geoengineering to the amount and strategy of the SO2 injection studied with the LMDZ S3A model. So everybody's probably itching to get out their model and have their model be the one that works or is the most accurate or leads to the most profit. And these people do a lot of different things here. So this is about the enhancement of the stratospheric sulfate aerosol layer has been proposed as a method of geoengineering to abate global warming. They're all after the same goal. They're all after the cash prize, big time. And I recommend reading this, but I'm going to skip to the end where it says other key characteristics of our simulation include a consequent stratospheric heating caused by the absorption of solar and infrared radiation by the aerosol that they're spraying everywhere, and changes in stratospheric dynamics with a collapse of the quasi-biennial oscillation at larger injection rates, which has impacts on the resulting spatial aerosol distribution, size, and optical properties. But it has to be noted that the complexity and uncertainty of stratospheric processes cause considerable disagreement among different modeling studies of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. This may be addressed through detailed model intercomparison activities, as observations to constrain the simulations of stratospheric aerosol geoengineering are not available, and analogs such as volcanic eruptions are imperfect. So they have no clue. They're all fighting to make the model that works the best over all these guys. And these things keep going, and I'm not going to read them all. I recommend you check them out, like this one. Impact of idealized stratospheric aerosol injection on the future ocean and land carbon cycles. So they acknowledge that what they are doing and the chemicals they are busting out into the atmosphere are causing our cycles, our natural cycles, to change, and may definitely have changes, unforetold changes, on all of our systems. That's why they have all these models. Everyone's trying to figure out, how many things. But how can any of these people that are dumb enough to think this is a good idea conceive of an actual plan that could actually work? And do you trust any of these people to have your best interest in mind? Like, if they find something that supposedly heals global warming but is toxic to humans, who's to stop them from doing it if it makes them enough money? These people would go underground or just hide or have masks or something. They don't care. They just make tons of money. It's unbelievably sick that these people are allowed to control our air, and it needs to stop. This one's another one. Changes in potential intensity and humidity under stratospheric sulfate geoengineering and its impact on tropical storms. So, what you're seeing in a lot of these things is their experiments are most likely the cause of heightened tropical storms. Meanwhile, they'll blame all these other things. They'll blame global warming while their experiments are causing it. They're so notorious for doing that. They love blaming the people that don't cause the problem for the problem that they're creating and cashing in on. And it's sickening. This one says, thus stratospheric aerosol geoengineering impacts on potential intensity and hence TC intensity are reasonably consistent with statistical forecasts of tropical North Atlantic hurricane activity driven by sea surface temperatures. However, the impacts of geoengineering on other ocean basins are more difficult to assess and require a more complete understanding of their driving parameters under present-day climates. Furthermore, the possible effects of stratospheric injection on chemical reactions in the stratosphere, such as ozone, are not well rendered in the models used so far. So why are we putting our trust in these people? Why are we allowing them to do something? If one of us even wants to have a fire in our backyard, we can get in trouble. We can get fined. We can get, who knows, you could probably even get arrested in some places. And these guys can do whatever they want above us, and we have no say in it, and the people around us are duped to the point of they can't even tell the difference between a commercial plane, which they frequently fly on, and one of these other ones that flying. They look up and they say, oh, it's the cold. It's because it's cold up there in the summer. These people have, I've heard it so much. It's the cognitive dissonance is just astounding. It's depressing, and it's sickening. Because even the smartest people I know don't recognize this. And here's the proof, guys. And when I clicked, because I really just typed into their database, stratospheric geoengineering and injections, aerosol injections, or something of the sort, and it got thousands of copies. I had to limit it to the last 4 years in my search, and there were still 1,500 or 1,100 different variants that I searched through. So all these, albedo enhancement by stratospheric sulfur injections, more research needed. They're finding a lot of things that they don't know, and they are way out of their control. They're letting it get way out of control, and they're given free rein by these countries to do this experiments because the country probably wants to be the one to find out the miracle for the mystery of phantom global warming and how to cure it. These people are sick, and what's driving them is sick, and they should not be in charge. Once again, I can't say it enough, but I do recommend that everybody checks these out because the collection of things here is just absolutely ridiculous. You can find a lot of stuff. Stratospheric sulfate geoengineering could enhance the terrestrial photosynthesis rate. That would be nice, but again, is it supposed to happen? What if you enhance the photosynthesis rate, but you don't have a water cycle anymore? Is that going to work? Like, what happens when these guys push these systems that have been going for many, many thousands of years potentially? What happens when they push them beyond the point of no return and then blame us? And then, is that going to be right? Is that going to be true? No. Should we stick up for that? Stand for it? No, absolutely not. But it seems like the first step is just getting people to notice, and it's surprising that the people can't notice. I have one aunt that gets it, and that's about it from the people that I know that really care. And getting people to see that those things up there are bad and that they're happening almost every day, and that understanding the weather system, question a lot of different things. A lot of people need to do that. Quasi-additivity of the radiative effects of marine cloud brightening and stratospheric sulfate aerosol injection. I've been looking at cloud brightening lately, and that's another topic I will dive into because it's not natural. Again, global stream flow and flood response to stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. So these papers, they do a lot. The research is there. It's just not being told. It's not being discussed in the public. A new idealized model of volcanic aerosol forcing, comparison with fully coupled aerosol chemistry climate models and application to reconstruct past volcanic forcing. Hey everybody, they're trying to manipulate the volcanoes and probably have been for a really long time. Another area of truth you can realize by looking at this database of stuff. And imagine that, because there's been a lot of different volcanic eruptions that have destroyed strategic kind of zones. I would not put it past them to weaponize the weather, volcanoes, hurricanes, everything. If they can be made into a weapon, they will do it. And so this is just kind of more key points on different things. I found this to be ridiculous. Number 3, no well-supported reservations about stratospheric aerosol injection justify restrictive governance of the technology's early stage research. So, all these people are in it together, and they don't want you shutting it down. They don't want the government getting in control. They want to be freely able to poison this planet to the point of no return and have you not have any clue about it. Stratospheric aerosol injection tactics and costs in the first 15 years of deployment. And take a look at some of these costs that you're going to see here. And this is all exponentially growing was what they plan. They want to start with like a couple hundred rockets maybe, and then go to thousands more each year, increasing exponentially all over the globe. This is never going to end. Look at these fees associated with all of this, with each one of these operating costs. And this is just their assumptions. Things are always more. Just in harvesting the sulfur and the chemicals alone, it's going to be a lot of money, and a lot of their corrupt people are going to get paid. The fuel required for this, the technology to build the planes, the landing fees, ground handling, cargo handling, overhead. Look at these things. A lot of cost for something that's killing us and killing our future generations, killing our planet, killing our animals, killing our plants, making it impossible to have a system that works, and a global system that works, a flat earth system that works. And all of this stuff, look at this. Costs go up as time goes on, so all of this cost will go up. And where are they going to get it? From us, taxing us while we aren't able to do anything. And these papers, this is like a little sample of what they look like. These PDFs for all of these different, each one of these has PDFs associated with it like this, with full research. And when you dive into each one, you see a lot of stuff. And this I found kind of interesting. Some of the excerpts from the search, a new ocean state after nuclear winter, agricultural response to nuclear winter, a large sustained El Nino-like response to nuclear conflict, impacts of nuclear war on terrestrial carbon, with a lot of Chinese names in there. So again, we have to wake up and we have to realize this stuff is in our face and it's not good. And the experiments that they're doing are all experiments to guide the future that they have planned for us. And these are a lot of clues here, and there's so many. I could make a video for years about all these and going over each one of these PDFs, but I won't. I want you all to research it, check it out. Let me know if you find something, share the links, share the story, share the comments, but wake people up, tell people about this. These are these are people from all the great colleges around the world, or the thought to be great colleges, and they are writing all these papers. They are in the know, and we are not, because our sources of knowledge are contaminated, toxic. So get in the know, get your family in the know, and when you look up and you see chemtrails, start to get mad. Pretty soon we'll start to do something about it, hopefully now. Bless you all.